Welcome back, everybody, to State of the Stallions. And believe it or not, this is the final episode for the regular season of the 2024 UFL, first year of this league. It's been a crazy journey so far. The Stallions are 8-1 heading into their last game, which we are going to break down on this episode. Thank you for sticking along with the ride with me throughout this year. It's been a lot of fun and still got a lot to look forward to. So this is State of the Stallions. Thanks for tuning in.
Here we go. Let's go. Hey, giddy up on three. 1, 2, 3. Giddy up.
You can feel the buzz when you're around this city. People have fallen in love with the Birmingham Stallions. Here we go. We're getting a little juice going. USFL championship.
So this week's game is a very strange situation. I frankly don't know if I've ever seen the exact thing in football elsewhere where the Stallions are playing the team they know they will play next week in the first round of the playoffs in the exact same location in Birmingham at Protective Stadium. So how do you approach that kind of situation? Well, we're going to find out what the Stallions do tomorrow, but it is very odd because I think I've been thinking about this all week, and I think the best thing to maybe compare it to, it's not a perfect analogy, but I think the closest thing, it's almost like a preseason game. Because frankly, it's just one of those games where obviously you don't want to lose. I mean, you hope to play well and you hope to win, but it just, in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. If the Stallions won 100-0 in this game, but went on to lose next week, nobody is going to celebrate or care about this win, right? And the opposite is true too. If the Stallions lost tomorrow 100-0, but they went on to win next week, people would live with that, right? We would take that. So again, the closest thing I can sort of compare it to is I think sort of like a preseason game where you are trying to win, but really almost more than that, you're trying to get guys playing time. You're trying to see how guys are doing, if they're ready for kind of the big show. Once the postseason start next week, you're trying to stay healthy. You're trying to make sure guys understand what's expected of them and the system, but not give away too much. You know, that's kind of, I think, the best comparison I can make. And I think going to this game, if it was up to me, which obviously it's not, but if it was up to me, I think there's 3 goals I would really have for the Stallions. And number one is stay healthy. Again, that's easier said than done. You can't control what happens on any play, but I think the worst thing possible in this game would be to lose somebody for the rest of the season to a serious injury. So, you know, we'll talk about the depth chart in a second, but it doesn't look like we're going to be resting our starters, or at least not many of them. I expect guys to play. It remains to be seen, though, whether they play a quarter, a half, or the entire game. But I think, you know, I just don't see a lot of purpose in letting, for example, Adrian Martinez play this entire game. I think he had a little bit of a rougher game last week. You know, if he could have maybe a quarter or a half to kind of get back into a good rhythm, to, you know, build his confidence back up a little bit and that sort of thing, I think there's a lot to that. But, you know, you would sure hate to lose him to a serious injury in the third or fourth quarter in a somewhat meaningless game. So hopefully we'll maybe get to see Matt Corral a little bit more tomorrow, as well as some other Stallions who maybe haven't got to play as much this year, because I think you have to think about keeping these guys healthy and fresh and ready for next week when they play in the playoffs. So I think that's the first goal I would have. I think the second goal I'd have for the Stallions is to dominate on defense. And again, well, I've talked about this all week. The Stallions defensive coordinator, John Chavis, is no longer with the team. You know, that is what it is. You can go back and listen to my episodes about that. But the fact of the matter is we have a new defensive coordinator. He was basically an interim defensive coordinator for the last 2 games. This is going to be his first sort of official game as defensive coordinator. We have a new assistant defensive coach in Anthony Blevins. There's a lot of changes on the defense and a lot of transition, specifically with the coaching staff. So things haven't gone great the last 2 weeks. We gave up a ton of points to a not very good Houston team, and we gave up 18 points to a good San Antonio team, but that wasn't enough with our offensive performance last week, and we ended up losing our first game of the season. So on both sides of the ball, there's a lot of room for improvement, but I think we know what the offense can do. They had a terrible week last week. It was the worst week they've ever had, but it was very uncharacteristic of them. And I expect them to bounce back from that against a good Michigan defense, but I expect them to bounce back. The defense, though, is a bigger question mark to me because, again, it's not just a one-off game. It's a troubling trend that's emerged over the last couple of weeks without our defensive coordinator. And so I would like to see this defense get back on track in this game. And I would be fine with them playing some of the defensive guys maybe a little bit longer just to kind of, again, help them to get into the rhythm of what it's like with this new defensive coordinator, new defensive staff. It's not brand new. It's not like they don't know this guy. Again, he called plays the last 2 weeks, so I think they're starting to settle into it a little bit more. I felt like the defense played better last week than they did 2 weeks ago, but I think they need to continue to build on that and help the defense continue to sort of um, be prepared for the final push of the season and the postseason. And then I think my third goal would be just to build some confidence back. Again, that goes on both sides of the ball as well as special teams. But last week was the first loss in over a year. Again, ended a 15-game win streak. The offense particularly really struggled, only putting up 9 points for first time ever, not at least hitting double digits, only 3 in the first half. Defense played okay, but also gave up way too many yards on the ground and too many third down conversions and other big plays. Special teams again was I think serviceable, but as we'll talk about in a minute, we got a new kicker back this week and some other changes. So, there's a lot I think of adversity that this team has facing and talked about that on the show this week. But I think this is a great opportunity for the team to build a little bit more confidence, to play well. Again, it's not a game where necessarily you have to win it, but it would be great if we could kind of go out there. I think the big thing we talked about last week, if you watched my recap of the loss to the Brahmas, was that the team seemed out of sync. They didn't seem like themselves. They didn't seem like they had their same sort of chemistry and mojo. The vibes were off. Something about it just wasn't quite right. And so it'd be great this week to see that again, right? To see them back in sync, to see the quarterback and the receivers on the same page, to see them able to run the ball better, to see the see the coaches and the players communicating well and clearly, to see the body language with a little bit, more levity to it as opposed to last week. So I think just to kind of see that Stallions team that we know and love kind of reemerge this week with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more swagger, a little more pep in their step again heading into the postseason, I think is important. And again, that doesn't even necessarily mean we have to win the game, right? But if the starters are in for the first quarter, first half, dominate, put up a couple scores, make some huge stops on defense, look good, and those guys come out and we put some other guys in, let some other guys play, and Michigan comes back at the end and wins, I'm fine with that, right? Because I think that's going to give them the confidence they need heading into the postseason. So those would be my goals for the game. As far as our roster report, sort of who's in, who's out, not a lot of huge changes, but a couple things worth mentioning. The big thing is that we did release kicker Ramiz Ahmed because we activated off of IR kicker Chris Blewett. And so Chris Blewett is back. Ramiz Ahmed was a great addition to the team while Blewett was out. He ended up going 10 for 13 on field goals, struggled just a little bit with accuracy, missed a couple kicks, close. But that was, I think, maybe probably part of the reason they decided to stick with Blewett. But he won us the game basically against DC. He was great at kickoffs for a lot of the time he was with us. So only have good things to say about him, and hopefully he gets another opportunity either in the UFL this year, or if not, with the season almost being done, then hopefully maybe in the NFL this fall or something like that. So shout out to Ramiz for all he did for us. And that being said, it's also great to have Chris Blewett back. I mean, I've been high on him. I thought he got off to a great start at the beginning of the year. He has a huge leg, and hopefully that will be a huge weapon for us as we head into the postseason. So that was kind of the one big change. A couple other guys remain on IR. Obviously, Scooby is out for the season and claims to be retired, but Deontay Brown and Chris Jackson still haven't quite got those guys back yet. I think at this point they're both eligible to come back. They've been on IR long enough that they could, but I'm not sure. Their injuries might be season-ending injuries because we still haven't got them yet back. Maybe we'll get them back. Hopefully we'll get them back for the postseason, but not yet. And then as far as who's inactive, again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the same guys that are starting for us or have started for us are starting this week. So the inactives, there's a couple maybe differences, but otherwise it's pretty similar to what you've come to expect this year. I mean, Jamar Smith is still that QB3 inactive. Isaiah Zuber is inactive. O'Shea Dugas, who was active last week, but's kind of been a rotational offensive line piece, he's inactive. The biggest sort of difference on offense is that running back Ricky Person Jr. is inactive this week for the first time ever. And I don't know if that's just giving him an opportunity to rest up before the postseason, or he did probably have his worst game of the year this past week, just in terms of production. So it might be, they just felt like they wanted to give these other two guys a shot and have him sit out before the postseason. I'm not surprised that they wanted to get Larry Roundtree some reps. He's a guy that I thought had a very good chance of being activated this game because he's only gotten to play in 2 games prior to this week. And he's a really fantastic running back in this game that, again, doesn't have the same significance as next week's game is going to have. This is a great opportunity to get him some more reps. And the 2 times that he was activated previously, CJ sat out. So, maybe just kind of trying to give everybody a relatively equal amount of opportunity. It probably made sense to go ahead and let Ricky sit 1 game and give these other 2 guys some more reps. So, again, I'm fine with that. I would rather Ricky sit out this week and be healthy and 100% for the playoffs than wear him down or lose him this week. So I'll be excited to see what those other guys can do. And then on the defensive side, a couple guys that have been sitting out. DeMarcus Mitchell, he's still inactive. JoJo Tillery still inactive. He's coming back from an injury. My understanding is I think he should hopefully be ready to go and ready to play for the postseason. But I think it's just not worth risking him coming back too soon again for a game like this. DeMarcus Gates did have a little bit of an injury, missed a little bit of practice this week. So again, there's just no reason to play him. So he's going to rest up and get healthy for the postseason. And then Neville Clark, I don't know if he also, I don't think he had any stated or disclosed injury. Mark Gilbert, who sat out a couple games recently, is activated. So Neville's gonna sit this one out. So they've got a great group in the secondary there, and they've kind of been rotating guys throughout the year. And it's been a while since Clark missed a game, so I think maybe it was just kind of his turn to be inactive this week. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And as far as the depth chart, again, I mean, I think it's about what you've come to expect. Offensively, there's really no surprises or really major differences, again, other than the fact that Ricky is out. But as far as tight ends, receivers, offensive line, I mean, it's all the same starters that we've grown accustomed to. Again, I think the bigger question is how long do those guys stay in? Do they stay in for 1 quarter, 1/2, a little bit into the second half, or do they play the whole game? And on defense, again, it's the same starters that have been starting for quite a while now. Again, minus DeMarcus Gates. At the one kind of surprise a little bit was that TJ Carter is starting at safety over Kenny Robinson Jr. I don't know if that is because Kenny was a little banged up and they're bringing him off the bench. Maybe he couldn't practice as much this week. Again, there was no disclosed injury, but I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it was because of the personal fouls that he had 2 personal fouls last week's game. So I don't know if sort of as a disciplinary kind of thing, they told him he wasn't going to start this week. I don't know if they just want to get a better look at TJ Carter, who played with us last year, but recently re-signed with us and just wanted to get him more reps. Or, again, it might just be a situation where, again, it's sort of a game that doesn't have the same significance that next week's game will. And so they just maybe decided to give TJ that opportunity to start. I'm not really sure what the reason is there, but that's kind of the one unusual thing. Otherwise it's, again, exactly what you would sort of expect, but that's the one spot where there's a little bit of a shakeup there. But we'll see. I expect Kenny probably to still play a good bit. And then special teams is, pretty much, again, what we've come to expect with this team, with the exception that we do have Deion Kane returning kicks instead of Gary Jennings. So I'm excited about that. I mean, Gary Jennings is a great player, but for whatever reason with us this year, he just hasn't seemed to have a lot of success returning kicks, or I haven't been terribly impressed with him. And Deion was a great kick returner for us last year. Had multiple kick returns for touchdowns. It was huge. So I think, especially in this league, the way field position is so critical, and how much of an opportunity you have to get great field position off of a kick return. I think it's really critical that we have our best guy there, our most productive guy back there. I don't know that Jennings has been the most productive for us, so I'm excited to see Deion get another chance, and hopefully he can make the most of that. So that's the roster heading into this weekend. Let's go ahead and talk about what's been going on around the UFL and with the Stallions in the Roundup. So the first thing I want to mention is that I have been doing a lot of interviews recently with just different radio stations and TV stations. Actually, yesterday morning, I was on The Score, which is a sports segment on the Fox affiliate out of down in Montgomery, WCOV. And so, that's one example. I was on Mac and Cube a few weeks ago. I've been on CBS 42 here in Birmingham, and I've tried to start kind of collecting some of those interviews and uploading them to my YouTube channel. So that way, if you can't catch them live, you can always go back later and watch them. And so they're usually fairly short, 5 to 10 minutes. But if you go to my YouTube channel, scroll down on the homepage there, I have a section now just dedicated to interviews where you can see all of those. So definitely check that out if you haven't got to see those. I mentioned this earlier in the show, and if you haven't heard it yet, you've probably been under a rock this week. But Stallions defensive coordinator John Chavis, SEC coaching legend, defensive coordinator at several different SEC schools with, I think 45 or so years of coaching experience at this point. And in his third year with the Stallions, he has stepped away from the team. I'm not going to go into that on here because I put out an entire emergency episode for about 15 minutes where I went through all of the latest news regarding that situation. And I also talked about it a little bit on my recap of last week's game against the Brahmas. And so if you missed those episodes, definitely go back and check those out and you can get caught up to speed on what's going on there. As far as the game, the Horsemen will be tailgating starting at 10 a.m. in the green lot beside Protective Stadium. So if you don't have another tailgate to go to, definitely get there a little early and check that out. It is rumored that a certain Shark Dog might make an appearance, and if he's going to be giving out some swag, some merch, some shirts. So if you get there early, you might be able to get you one of those. Actually, a little bit later than that, after the tailgate at 11:45 a.m. at the Fan Fest, which is in the north end zone of the stadium, I believe, Scooby Wright will be there doing an autograph session for any fans or anybody who wants to see him. So we all love Scooby. He's been such a pivotal leader and part of this team for 3 years now, and he chose on his own. I mean, he was living back in California because he was done for the season. He went ahead and went home to California. He's not still with the team in Texas, but he chose to come all the way out to Birmingham just to see the fans and to let them know how much they mean to him, how much he appreciates their support over the years, and how much he loves us because he knows how much we love him. And so he came all the way from California to Alabama to see us, to sign autographs, to give away merchandise, to let people know that we mean a lot to him, and again, vice versa. So definitely make it over there before the game if you can. And then obviously the game will kick off at 1 p.m. The following weekend, so a week from today, January, June 8th, Saturday, June 8th at 2 p.m., the USFL Conference Championship will take place at Protective Stadium. So make sure you get your tickets for that. We need to pack Protective. We need, the biggest crowd we've had yet for that USFL Conference Championship game, and make sure we support our boys and help them get that W so they can go to the first UFL championship, which will take place the following weekend on Sunday, June 16th at 4 p.m. Central Time in St. Louis. Tickets are on sale for that game. So, again, you might not want to jump the gun yet and buy those, but if you're thinking about it, just know that they are available. And Lord willing, if we do win the USFL Conference Championship, as soon as that game's done, you can pick up your tickets for the short drive up to St. Louis for that championship game. Again, if we were to make it, it'd be great to have as many people there as possible. One thing that is just interesting, I thought was worth noting, is that the UFL announced that they will have summer showcases again this summer. This is something that the XFL did last year, as basically kind of almost like a sort of a workout or combine, the one opportunity really for free agents to try out for this league. So they will do that again in 6 locations across the country. I think the closest one to Birmingham is in Atlanta. And the main reason I wanted to mention that is that that's just another positive sign that this league is planning for 2025. They're starting to kind of put those things in motion. And so I think that's an exciting thing. Obviously, nothing's confirmed. I mean, the league, has said we plan to come back next year and this sort of thing, but obviously you never really know. But at least there, again, are some tangible things, kind of, some steps being taken that gives us maybe some hope that we're going to be locked in for at least one more year. As far as attendance for week 9, it was pretty rough, frankly. I mean, you had 3 1-7 teams hosting a home game in Arlington, Memphis, and Houston. Memphis and Houston, of course, have had the weakest attendance all year, so both of them had pretty poor attendance. And then Arlington also was down, to kind of in the 8,000 area. The San Antonio game that Birmingham was at was the highest attended game, just a little bit under 12,000 there. In that 11,000, 800 or 900 so range, I think, if I remember correctly. And so, a decent showing there. I will say I was at the game. I talked about it again on my recap episode, but you get in a dome like that there in the Alamo Dome, and I mean, even with only a little over 11,000 people, I mean, that place does get rocking. So, credit to those fans. They've shown up all year. And if they do get the playoff game with a victory over St. Louis, then, hopefully they'll get even more out for that game. But overall, the average, I believe, was the worst it's been all year. I think it was around in the 8,000s. So a little bit of a dip there, not super encouraging, but this week should be better with St. Louis hosting and Birmingham, DC, and I believe Memphis. So should have a little bit of better average there. As far as TV ratings, they actually did kind of bounce back a little bit last week. Week 8, they had the worst TV ratings thus far this season. So they were a little bit better this week. The Birmingham game was over 1 million viewers, which unfortunately for us, over 1 million people tuned in to see us lose. But good for the league. It was nice to have another game over 1 million. And I think the average between the three broadcast windows, because we did have the regional games again this week for the final time this season, but between the three broadcast windows, the average was, kind of in the a little over 900,000, just shy of 1 million, which again is great. So hopefully those numbers will continue to sort of climb as we move into the end of the season, into the postseason here. So, we'll see what happens here in week 10 and then moving into the postseason. As far as power rankings, I mean, at this point, I think it's pretty obvious who the best teams are. The playoffs are locked up. I would still keep the Stallions at number one. It's not a slight to the Brahmas, but, the Stallions played their worst game, I think, maybe in the history of the modern franchise. They lost by a one possession game, a very close game, despite playing as poorly as they did to a very good San Antonio team. But in a game where, San Antonio, I think, had a little bit more motivation and a little bit more to play for than Birmingham did. Birmingham still has a better record than San Antonio. The teams that have beaten San Antonio, Birmingham has beaten. So I don't want to overreact and, you know, drop Birmingham several rungs down the ladder like some people did. I would still say they are the team to beat as we approach the postseason, but they certainly are beatable as we saw last week. So I would still leave them at one. I would have San Antonio at two. I think for the time being, I would still have Michigan at three. I think St. Louis is probably better than Michigan when they're at their best, but there's a lot of questions still with St. Louis. I mean, they kind of got whooped by Arlington. A week ago they haven't had AJ for a couple weeks now. He's going to start this week, but we don't really know exactly how healthy he is. So there's some questions with that. I think at their best, maybe they are better than Michigan, but I'm not sure they're at their best right now. And Michigan has just been, steadily improving and getting better week over week. So I'm going to leave Michigan at three, put St. Louis at four as we wrap up the season here. And then I think out of the teams that didn't make the playoffs, you got to put DC at five. I think Arlington at six, and then Houston at seven, and Memphis at eight. Which leads me to my predictions for this final week of the season. As far as the Stallions game, I'm going to go with the Stallions winning. I think, again, there's not a lot to play for in this one. I think the Stallions are going to want to bounce back and be motivated by the loss last week. They get to play back at home. I think the Stallions have a little bit more depth than the Panthers, and the Panthers have more guys who are injured and resting this week. So I think, if it does become a game of sort of more of kind of backups, I do like the Stallions guys that they'll rotate in a little bit more than the guys the Panthers have. I am hugely high on Bryce Perkins. So, if we see a lot of him, he could be the X factor. I mean, the Michigan was on the cusp of losing last week, and then they put Perkins out there, and it was pretty much game over once he got the ball in his hands. So, that could change things. The Stallions could maybe get out to an early lead, and then if they again sub some guys in, Perkins could be too much for us in the second half and could pull away with the game. So that's certainly possible. But I don't know. I like the Stallions in this one. I think they're going to play to win, while also, again, rotating some guys in probably, but still wanting to kind of bounce back from last week. And I think they'll be able to do that. But again, what's that worth? We can leave that to the pundits to decide. But as far as the other playoff game, it's a big game, San Antonio, St. Louis. The winner gets home field advantage in the playoffs. It's going to be in St. Louis, so that helps them. But I'm going to take San Antonio in this one. I mean, I was really impressed with the team last week. I think they're peaking at the right time. They're getting healthy. I really like Chase Garbers in this offense. I don't, I don't know how much success he would have in a different team, in a different system or scheme, but he's certainly in the perfect fit for him in this AJ Smith system. So, and he looked great last week against us. McFarland is one of the best players in the league, and their defense is incredible. I mean, they're scary. And like I said earlier, I just think there's some questions with St. Louis right now. I don't know how healthy AJ is. They're coming off, kind of a rough patch here. And I just think San Antonio has a lot of momentum and probably really wants to get that playoff game at home and not have to play in St. Louis 2 weeks in a row. So I think it's going to be a tough matchup. Definitely one you want to tune into, but I'm going to go with San Antonio. And as far as the other two non-playoff games, DC Arlington, this is a tough one for me. I could really see this going either way because I think Arlington again has underperformed all year. I think they're better than their record shows, and they're finally kind of hitting their stride and winning some games. But DC also coming off a big win against a terrible Memphis team, has final game at home. They want to go out obviously on a positive note. I'll go DC in this one just because I think they are the better team. But it wouldn't surprise me if Arlington pulls off the upset. I'll say that. And then as far as the last game, Houston and Memphis, I mean, this one's interesting because this might be the game. I don't know, maybe San Antonio, St. Louis is still the game to watch this weekend, but this is closely maybe the if not the game to watch, then definitely maybe the second most exciting game to watch because it is as it's affectionately known, either the Tank Bowl or the Toilet Bowl or whatever you want to call it. It's the two worst teams in the league, and the winner will get first pick in the UFL draft, which again, like those showcases, is another maybe potential positive sign that the league is planning for 2025, talking about a draft here and that sort of thing. But the winner of that game is going to get the first pick in every round of the UFL draft in 2025 or for 2025. So these teams got a lot to play for. These coaches got a lot to play for. GMs, really want their teams to pull out the W. And of course, everybody wants to, finish on the positive note. Whoever loses this game, I think, is going to be widely considered the worst team in this league. So, you don't want to be those guys. And, I think I'm going to go with Houston in this one, mainly because I like Nolan Henderson. I think he's going to probably get some playing time, and I think he's kind of an X factor. I think Memphis has just not been able to figure out the quarterback spot. They've rotated Case Cookus, Troy Williams, Josh Love, who's going to be starting this game. None of them have really formed up to expectations or impressed. I think the team has just really struggled and really kind of fallen off, and I don't really see them bouncing back this week. I don't think Houston, again, is much better, but I think Henderson has a lot to play for. He probably wants to either kind of try and prove that he deserves to be the Roughnecks quarterback next year or give himself a shot at getting some more looks for the NFL. And I think, again, with what he can do with his legs and things, I think he can really be a dynamic guy. And then, you throw in some of their other playmakers like Justin Hall and Mark Thompson and Kiki Chisholm and the guys they've got. I just see them outscoring Memphis, frankly, in this game. And I think Houston's defense is better than Memphis's. Memphis started the year with a really great defense, but they've really fallen off. So I'm going to take Houston in that one, and that means they could get the first pick in each round next year. So those are my predictions for the week. So that's going to do it for this week. Thank you again for tuning in, and thank you for supporting the show all season. It's been great to have the response that I've gotten and positive feedback. And again, hopefully we'll continue to improve this show and make it better moving forward into the future. But it's great to have one regular season under the belt. Really looking forward to a couple postseason episodes. Hopefully we'll get to make several of those as the Stallions, again, Lord willing, make a run to the championship. So stick along for that ride. Should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to a great game today. Hopefully you can make it out, or if not, then you can tune in at home on the TV. Of course, the guys need our support right now, facing a lot of adversity and getting ready to enter into the most critical stretch of the year. And so let's make sure we rally behind them and let them know that we are for them, we support them, and we're alongside them in this quest to three-peat. So this is your host, Luke Miller, State of the Stallions. Thank you again for tuning in. Giddy up.